On March 1st, 2026, before most people had finished their morning coffee, Iranian Shahed drones struck two Amazon Web Services data centers in the United Arab Emirates. A third AWS facility in Bahrain was hit hours later. This was the first time in history that military strikes had disrupted a major US tech company's data centers during active conflict. Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps claimed responsibility explicitly, targeting what they called economic centers tied to US interests. The war that started February 28th was already about oil. The world understood that. What the world didn't understand was that it was also about something else entirely. This is AI Wire Daily. Start with what most people know, then show them what they don't. The Strait of Hormuz is 21 miles wide at its narrowest point. Through that gap flows 1/4 of the world's seaborne oil, 1/3 of global crude exports, and significant volumes of liquefied natural gas. On March 3rd, Iran's Revolutionary Guard Corps declared it shut, threatening to set ablaze any vessel attempting passage. Within days, roughly 150 ships were stranded around the strait. Japan, which gets 70% of its Middle East oil through Hormuz, immediately scrambled for alternatives. Pakistan formally requested Saudi Arabia reroute supplies. Oil markets went into freefall. That's the story everyone reported. Here's what they missed. 17 submarine fiber optic cables run through the Red Sea. Additional cables thread through the Strait of Hormuz itself. These cables carry the vast majority of internet traffic between Europe, Asia, and Africa. Every email, every video call, every AI query that travels between those continents passes through one of these two passages. Both are now effectively closed to commercial traffic, simultaneously. Doug Midori, director of internet analysis at the network intelligence firm Kentic, told Rest of World, "Closing both choke points simultaneously would be a globally disruptive event. I'm not aware of that ever happening. The cables haven't been deliberately cut, but the repair ships that would fix any damage can't safely reach either passage. If a cable breaks, from an anchor drag, from collateral fire, from a missile that misses, it stays broken, indefinitely." Amazon, Microsoft, and Google spent years and billions of dollars building Gulf data center hubs, betting the region would become the next great center for artificial intelligence. Those data centers now sit inside an active conflict zone, connected to the rest of the world by cables that can't be repaired, and powered by energy infrastructure that has been disrupted.
Here's the one that surprised me most.
Qatar produces approximately 1/3 of the world's helium. Qatar is now inaccessible, its gas exports halted, its shipping routes disrupted, its normal operations suspended. Most people have no idea why that matters for AI. Here's why it matters. Helium isn't just for balloons. It's essential to semiconductor manufacturing. Chip fabrication chambers require an inert atmosphere to prevent contamination during the production process. Helium, chemically non-reactive, capable of reaching cryogenic temperatures, is one of the only gases that works. You can't make advanced chips without it. South Korea sourced 64.7% of its helium from Qatar in 2025. That supply is now disrupted. And here's the connection that makes this hit home. Samsung and SK Hynix, both headquartered in South Korea, produce more than half of the world's memory chips, the DRAM and NAND that go into every server, every AI training cluster, every data center on Earth. Tom's Hardware reported that the Qatar Helium shutdown put the chip supply chain on a 2-week clock. SK Hynix doesn't even have a helium recovery system. Once the reserves run out, production slows. TrendForce confirmed Samsung and SK Hynix are actively scrambling for alternative helium sources. The US has helium production, but it can't be scaled overnight. Forbes reported this week that NVIDIA and AMD, which depend on Samsung and SK Hynix for memory, face indirect risk through their Asian supply chains. The AI boom requires memory chips. Memory chips require helium. Helium requires Qatar. Qatar requires peace in the Gulf. There is currently no peace in the Gulf.
Here's the detail
That tells you how long this has been coming. One day before US forces launched strikes on Iran on February 28th, the Pentagon quietly contacted mining companies in the Defense Industrial Base Consortium. The request? Boost domestic output of 13 critical minerals immediately. The list included tungsten, antimony, gallium, germanium, nickel, graphite, and yttrium. These aren't obscure materials. Gallium and germanium are essential for compound semiconductors used in 5G chips and military radar. Tungsten goes into military hardware and chip manufacturing equipment. Antimony is used in night vision devices and flame retardants for military electronics. Almost all of these materials are currently refined in China. The US has deposits in California, Wyoming, Alaska, but doesn't have the infrastructure to process them into usable form. The Pentagon knew that going into this conflict. The pre-strike scramble to domestic miners confirms it. The Soufan Center reported that this represents a structural vulnerability that predates the Iran conflict by decades, the result of offshoring, not just manufacturing, but the entire critical minerals supply chain. The Iran war didn't create this problem. It exposed it. Amazon, Microsoft, and Google didn't walk into this blindly. They had threat models. They had risk assessments. They spent years negotiating with Gulf governments, building redundancy into their networks, securing diplomatic assurances. None of it was enough. The attacks on AWS data centers in UAE and Bahrain were unprecedented. Fortune reported that analysts called it a signal that AI infrastructure has now become a strategic military target, not just a civilian commercial asset. The IRGC explicitly cited the data center's role in economic activity tied to US and Israeli interests. Sam Zabin, a fellow at the Center for Strategic and International Studies, told Rest of World that Gulf data infrastructure has never been tested this way. A theoretical scenario has become a concrete precedent, said Christian Alexander from the Rabden Security and Defense Institute. This does not introduce a new risk so much as it validates what was already in every serious threat model. AWS told customers to consider migrating workloads out of the Middle East region entirely. The company warned that the operating environment remains unpredictable. That's an understatement.
The ceasefire announced today, April 8, 2026,
is 2 weeks. A pause, not a resolution. The helium shortage doesn't resolve in 2 weeks. Samsung and SK Hynix are still scrambling. The critical minerals refining gap doesn't close in 2 weeks. The US still can't process gallium and germanium at scale. The AWS data centers are still being assessed. The submarine cables are still at risk. The world built its AI infrastructure on top of a region that was never fully stable, powered by energy that flows through a 21-mile bottleneck connected by cables that run through active conflict zones, supplied by minerals that flow through supply chains controlled by adversaries. The Iran war didn't create these vulnerabilities. It revealed them. And when the ceasefire ends, if it ends, they'll all still be there. This is AI Wire Daily.